I was born in Calvert, Texas, and that's Central Texas. It's about an hour from Waco. It's about 30 minutes from Bryan, Texas. I don't think very far from Dallas, although I never traveled to Dallas. Waco was about as far as I went to go shopping. My dad ran a gas station. He managed that gas station, and he would often tell stories when we were growing up about how he came from Mexico City and he didn't know a word of English, so he talked about his struggles. You know, he came when he was about 17, and his struggles of learning the language, and how he'd have to go into a restaurant and listen to what people were ordering to be able to order something. You know, and then he met Mom when they were about 21, and then they got married, and they had my oldest brother, and then my second brother, and then my sister, Rachel, then Ben, and then I guess it was Tony, Esther, Reuben, and myself. So there were 8 of us. I was the last one. And I had the advantage, I think, or maybe Reuben and I both had the advantage of seeing all my older brothers and sisters grow up, and we always heard about their mistakes too, you know. When Dad would sit at the dinner table and Mom, we always ate together, and it was always at dinner, because at breakfast, I guess Dad would go off to work so early, like at 6 in the morning. You know, it was dawn and he was gone. In first grade, there was a little girl, my best friend, who came to school one day, and she said, "I can't play with you anymore." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Because you're Mexican." "I am? Are you sure?" I thought it was a disease. So I went to my first grade teacher and I said, "My friend Ellen said I can't play with her anymore because I'm Mexican. That's not true, is it?" And the teacher said, "Oh, I don't know." She just didn't know how to answer the question, you know. Now it's kind of amusing, but at the time they didn't know how to deal with those situations. And quite honestly, that school was one that was segregated at one time, and my dad was able to break that barrier. He asked the school to please allow my older brothers and sisters to start school there, and they didn't want to do it at first, and he went to the school board, and eventually he got his children in. Well, those were the first Hispanics to ever go there. And by the time Reuben and I were there, other Hispanic children were already in there. And I guess all of that background, you know, growing up with that kind of support system and that strong belief that everybody should be treated equally, probably played a very big role in my life growing up. And I loved speech from the time I was a little girl. I can remember learning, getting information about presidents and so forth, and I'd go to the backyard where my brother had cut down the mulberry tree because it was so messy, and I'd climb up there, and I was giving a speech because I had just learned about Abraham Lincoln and George Washington, and so I would speak to the hens because my chickens were my pets, and you know, I really loved doing that. And so one day my mother said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well," she saw me bringing all these bricks, and I don't know where we'd gotten bricks, but I was putting all these bricks around. She said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm building a little office. This is my little brick office, and this is my entrance to my office." She said, "Oh, okay." And she let me, you know, and I could do whatever. And of course they had built me this real cute little playhouse with the windows and a door, and had a little lock on it, and it didn't have electricity, which I always wanted to have, but I would bring a little candle in, I would light it, and sometimes I was there during the rainstorm. So I had an opportunity to enjoy being outdoors, enjoying just the freedom of pretending, and so drama and acting was a big part of my life. Of course, Dad wanted straight A's on those report cards, and you better not come back with a B, and Lord have mercy if you ever saw a C on your report card. I don't think we saw any C's, but he was just, you know, really, really adamant about that. And Mom was just, you know, the loving, caring mother, but she was always giving you tips, you know, just always giving you a little advice. And I remember one time I came home from the 2nd grade, and I said, "You know, Mom, the teacher said that I should be in the spelling bee. What do you think? That's a little scary." And my mother was washing clothes, I'll still remember. And she said, "I think you should go for it." We moved to Corpus at a young age because Dad had a heart attack in about 1958, I think, or maybe it was a little after that, 59, and they told him he really had to stop working So we moved to Corpus, where I already had, in 1960, a brother who was already practicing law since '53, which was William. Tony had just graduated from law school in 1960, and Esther graduated with her teaching degree from Baylor. She had graduated, I guess it was in '58. So everybody was already in Corpus. So when we came, most of my brothers and sisters were here. And so I went to Hamlin to enroll with my brother Reuben, who was a couple of years older. And when we got there, we went in to visit with the counselor, and the counselor told my dad, well, I know your children are used to making A's, but you're not in a country school, you're in a city school. And we don't have very many Hispanic children here, quite frankly. We have the cream of the crop. So just be prepared, because things could change. And we left that office, and my dad said, don't listen to a word that woman said. You have grown up in home with your mom and with me, and you will continue to do good work. So that was the beginning of our middle school years. Then we went on to high school at Ray High School. That was at Hamlin Junior High. We went to Ray High School, and again, I got really into the speech. I started going to speech tournaments and was getting a lot of success there, and took debate. I had a wonderful teacher. I had a really good Spanish teacher, but she expected me to know everything all the time, and if I didn't raise my hand, she'd call on me anyway. It was very stressful, but I'm glad she did it, because I really listened to what she had to say, and it was all historical. It was just so interesting. And I had just some wonderful teachers, I think, at Ray High School. And so when I graduated from Ray, I went to the University of Houston, because my brother was going to go to UT. And you have to remember, all my other brothers and sisters had all had an opportunity to go to college. That was the one thing my parents said: you must get an education. That's your salvation, and that's going to be your success in life. You've got to be successful. You've got to get an education. So we already knew that. We knew we were going to go to college. That was destiny. I graduated from the University of Houston with a Bachelor of Arts, and I said, gosh, maybe I should go into teaching. And I remember my mother saying, Marilyn, why don't you go to law school? You've got brothers that are already practicing attorneys too. Reuben's already in law school. Why don't you think about law school? Or you'd be the first female in our family. And I thought, gosh, there were no females in Corpus even. I think maybe there was one, maybe, and I don't even think yet. I think it happened sometime during the time I was studying. There were just no females in law. And I said, gosh, your mother, there are not very many females in that section. She said, well, so it doesn't matter. You have 3 brothers that are. That's why I say she'd give us little tidbits of information, and just enough to be really encouraging. And I said, well, maybe I will. So I found out quickly where I could enroll so I wouldn't miss too much time to get in, and South Texas College of Law downtown was available. So I enrolled, registered, and started law school. And I loved criminal law. Of course, once I got out, I never wanted to practice criminal law. I found my niche in immigration law and Social Security. And I think immigration law, because I knew my parents were immigrants and I knew what they had suffered, and I wanted to be able to unite families. And I think Social Security law, because it's administrative law and you're helping people who can't work, because of a disabling condition, whether it's mental or physical. And I felt like I was giving, to those people who needed help and didn't have anyone to really help them, didn't have anyone to defend them. So I think that's where my areas came in. And I think the family, the support system, all of that helped, because the second year that I was in college, before law school, my father died. But my father had always, and I knew my father had always told my second oldest brother, William, who was practicing law here since '53, he said, if anything happens to me, I want you to take care of my wife and take care of the 2 younger children. And he did. There were 400 students in law school, and if I remember correctly, there were like 10 women, and I was one of them. And I really never had classes with any of them. There were just so many male students. I really never had classes with, I don't think, with any of the females, maybe one. But it was very, very stressful, and there was a lot of, you had to read your cases, and it was you know, I had like 15 hours. Should have never taken 15 hours at a time, but because it was hard, really hard. I mean, it was hard enough that you were female. And so you had to, when the teacher called on, you had to stand up and recite the case and what happened in the case and so forth, and then the whole class would discuss it. And you always knew you had to do super well because you were the female, and you didn't want the males to think you know, you couldn't keep up with them. So in a way that was good because it was more challenging that way. But it was difficult, and it was, it required a lot of dedication, a lot of time. It didn't give you much time to party or go out or do anything except study. I met my husband in 1974, and I met him at a party. Actually, it was my brother Tony's party that I think he was holding for William. No, it was William's home. Somebody was having a birthday. And so I went with a date. And so my brother Tony calls me over and he says, "Oh, Mary Hellen, I want you to meet someone." I said, "Okay." And he says, "This is a friend of mine, Mary Alice, and her husband Arnold. This is her brother David, and he's single." Boy, that struck me the wrong way, because here I was in college, you know, and I had just finished college, and I'm thinking, why is he introducing me that way? This is so embarrassing. And so I said, "Oh, well, it's very nice to meet you," and I turned around and left and went back to where I was socializing. And then later, David called me at home. I guess he didn't forget my name or whatever. Found me in the phone book, and he called me and invited me to go somewhere, but I wasn't there. So when I came home, Mother says, "Oh, and a David Berlanga called you." And I said, "And who's David Berlanga?" And she says, "I don't know, but he said that was his name." I said, "I don't know a David Berlanga." She said, "Okay, well, don't worry about it. He just asked for you, didn't leave a number." I said, "Okay, fine." So I forgot about it. And then one day, the LULAC organization, and that was about the only organization you could join at the time. There wasn't anything else, but it was a real good one. It was real strong, the LULAC organization. So anyway, I joined the female branch, and they were doing one of these Fiesta Mexicana, I think is what it was called, and it was before Bayfest, and they would set up booths downtown, and it was really nice, and they'd close off the street. And I said, "Oh, I'll be a gypsy," because I know about reading palms. I learned that from some friends who were from India at school. So sure enough, I dressed up. My sister made me the outfit, and so before I went out there, I went to sell tickets so people would come to this thing. So I found David and some other people that worked with him, and I was selling them tickets. So then he said, "Well, would you like to have a cup of coffee one day?" And I said yes. And so after that, he went to the Fiesta Mexicana, and of course I was dressed as a gypsy, reading hands. Well, I want you to know, the line to my tent was all the way down to the street, and it was a tent. They actually set it up. We gave it a lot of atmosphere, some of that dry eyes, and you know, but I could read the hands, and so I had a lot of fun doing that. I lost my voice, and that was kind of the beginning of our courtship. And then for Christmas one year, he gave me a stocking. Well, that year, December of '94, he gave me a stocking. And so it was a cute little doll stuck in there. He knew I loved dolls. And so I pulled out the little doll, and I kept getting all these little things. At the very bottom was this little bitty box. Well, it was my engagement ring. So then we planned the wedding for June, and then June came. May, I got my results on the bar that I had passed, so in June we got married. So it was kind of a nice wedding, because not only were we celebrating our wedding, but the fact that I had passed my exam. And we went on our honeymoon to Puerto Vallarta, came back, and I started practicing law. And he was working with, I think, MHMR at that time, and he decided, my gosh, she's an attorney, and I've got a master's. I'm going to go back and get my doctorate. So he went to A&M Kingsville, and who had a doctoral program, and he went and got his doctoral degree in bilingual education. And the one thing that we always had in common was this whole thing about education and what we wanted to do for our children if one day we had children. Well, the first one came about a year and almost 2 years, because I think we were married in June of '75, and she was born in September of '76, so it was kind of like a long wait till we got our first baby, and we were so excited. And so we started planning, you know, all these things that we were going to be doing with her. Well, when she was just a few months old, I started feeling sick, and then the doctor said, "Oh my gosh, you're pregnant." And I said, "Okay, well, okay, I have a baby at home, okay." Well, at 6 months, I said, "I'm just not feeling very well." And the doctor said, "Well, we're going to have to do a scan on you." And they did a scan on me, and the people that are running the scan are going, "Ah!" And I went, "What? What's the matter?" And I'm lying down, you know, just real concerned. And they said, they looked at each other, and I said, "What?" "Well, just a minute, let's confirm it. It's not anything bad." And then they go, "Oh yeah, you've got twins." I went, "Twins? I have a baby at home. What do you mean twins?" Oh my gosh. And then I sat up and I said, "Oh my gosh, I've got to call Mother." So I called Mother. I said, "Mother, I'm having twins." And my mother went, "Oh, how wonderful." I said, "Yes, Mother, but I'm carrying." It's very hard. She said, "No, that's wonderful. I've always wanted twins in our family." Well, she had had 8. And so, so my mother was really the one, and my husband's mother, they both helped us with the children. She had watched Christina for me, my oldest one. When the twins were born, I had to I'd send the twins to my mother-in-law and Christina with my mother. When Christina was 2.5, I put her in a day care program with the Baptist church. And then when, because that's really about all we had available. And then when my twins were old enough, I put them in the program. You had to be 2.5, I think. And then the last one to come was Kathy. And Kathy was born when they were about 2.5, when the twins were 2.5. Christina was 3.5. So they were pretty close in age. And then Mother helped watch Kathy, and they were very, very close. And my kids all came out. I always felt that I knew all children in this world, they all have a gift, but I wanted to see if they could find their own gift, or if sometimes we had to help nourish to find out what that gift was.
She got elected in 1983. I always said that she started out with a bang, because it was the first time for an Hispanic and for a woman to be elected to the State Board of Education, a woman. And everybody thought that she was going to be coming from the Valley and Corpus, and everybody was expecting, and all they had ever heard of the Valley and all that was Raza Unida. And they said, "Oh, they're sending us a Raza Unida lawyer woman from the Valley." And they were all just, we had already heard this through the grapevine that they were very worried about that. But the very first meeting that she went to, she was up against the establishment. And she was just a 5'4" young lady, really. She was in her early 30s. And she was up against the establishment, and she immediately went against the establishment, because we both agreed that what was happening there was something very wrong.
What I want you to do as private citizens, unless you are already on that panel, what I want you to do is just review the textbooks. Review, for example, history. Look for the history books that discuss civil rights, that discuss, for example, the geography of our land. Look for that and see if, after you've heard the presentation from our professors, who I think did an outstanding job, you can look to see if we have been involved like a common thread going throughout the book in history. And you should find that. I think the most important thing is to provide a quality education for all children. And what I have had to face on the board is that when I came on board, there were board members who thought that the children from the Valley and from the Corpus Christi area, the area that I represented, were not necessarily children that needed the same thing that the children in other parts of the state needed. And I thought, well, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this picture. My children live in Corpus Christi, and whether they lived in Corpus Christi or the Valley, why would my children need anything less than what your children are receiving? And they said, oh, well, it's just that there's different categories of kids. You've got kids who can really learn material, and you've got children who who struggle with that. And so we have to prepare books in a different manner for those children. I said, you're telling me that the children that I represent are not capable of reading the material that you're preparing for supposedly the kids in your district? I'm sorry, I totally reject that. I will not be a part of this. I want the same materials for my children as I would for all of the children across the state. And that was the first line of battle. There was a history book that was coming up for adoption, and a lady came up and said, this is a 7th grade history book, and you have a picture of Selena Quintanilla in here, and I want it removed, and I'd like to see Vicky Carr's picture replaced in the book. And I looked at the history book, and I turned to the page, and I said, well, wait a minute. It says this person made Tejano music popular. If we put Vicky Carr's picture in there, that's not going to be accurate. Why would you want to remove Selena Quintanilla? And she said, because she's dead. I said, ma'am, this is a history book. Everybody's dead in this book. You face situations like this, and you face the situation of the lady that comes up to you and says, I want to make sure you're going to include my great-great-grandfather Stephen F. Austin, and you say, yes, ma'am. I just also want to make sure that the people who were here to greet him are also included in the book.
We have always been advocates, and she has always been an advocate for teachers and for students. And basically, she's been an advocate for what's right. And she's been on the board for 20 some odd years. And every time she says, I'm going to retire, I've been there enough. People who she knows from all over the country and from all over the state convince her not to retire with the words, you are the only reasonable person, the only word of reason on that board, because among 2 or 3 others, everybody else is, just not thinking straight. So they convince her, she stays on the board, and so here we are. She is still on the State Board of Education. And I'm very proud of her work. She's really very courageous.
This is our opportunity to have some input in history, because we have been left out of the history books. And this has been since day one, since I've been on the board since 1983, when they used to spend 10 pages on talking about all the negative things about the Aztecs. And several of us argued, well, wait a minute, why don't you talk about the positive things? Like, these people were scientists, they were mathematicians, they found cocoa, and before Hershey's made their millions off of it, it was the cocoa plant, and all these other wonderful things. And let our children read about how the wonderful things that they did. You want to tell a few negative things, okay, it's just like slavery. Why do they say so little about slavery? Because they say, oh, that's not nice for children to have to read about slavery. Maybe we can just say a little bit less about it. No, talk about how you never want that to happen again, how this happened. And when you talk about discrimination, talk about how it impacted all these people, not just a few, everybody.
Well, to education, her legacy is going to be that she always puts students first. She always puts teachers first. Her legacy is that she always fought for the rights of children and students and teachers.
Board members, remember, we didn't have an opportunity to develop this test. We did not. And our commissioner very clearly told us last week in our work session that this standard setting is our responsibility. This is the role that we're going to play. But this is a very important role, because this is the one that's going to impact your students. We need to be very careful. And if we're going to be careful and we want to set high standards, as we've all talked about, and I think we all agree to that, and we all agree that it should be phased in, I think our first commitment should be to those 3rd graders who have to pass that reading test to go on to the next level of school. So please support this motion and give us time as a group to study the results of the spring semester before we move into the next step.
The fact of the matter is that the decision that we have made today is going to cause so much consternation on some of our students that this is just a bad decision.
And I would also like to comment on that, because of the high failure rates on a field test when we know that this test is so very different from the TOS test, because now we have the algebra and geometry, the biology, the chemistry, the physics, and if you look at the number of certified teachers, I'd be curious to know if anybody knew how many certified teachers, even in this room as a board member, if you know how many certified teachers are in those classrooms teaching those courses, and how many of them have waivers, and how many of them are really certified in some other field. And you know that the textbooks aren't out there because the social studies won't be out there till next fall, and biology, it may take an additional year. So I think it's a very sad situation, and of course, the ones that are really going to struggle with this are the children and the parents as they see the high failure rates. I feel that we have not really we didn't really have a sufficient time today to discuss and debate this issue, because I think by casting the vote as it went through by the majority, we now are going to have a high failure rate, which is going to be something that's going to be difficult for you to explain.
To me, her legacy is that she's just been a wonderful mother. She's been a wonderful wife. And she's the love of my life and my partner and all those good things that you say about a person, you know, after 33 years. And I too believe that in her work, she strives for excellence. And in her home life, she's always strived to do the best for her family.
I would like to think that I have somehow inspired a child or children to take the challenge to either pursue a career or pursue their dream, and know that they can be proud of who they are. They don't have to be Caucasian to be proud.
Hail the mighty scorpion.